Oh, hello. We're in John's Gospel. We've almost finished chapter 15. We're going to go back to our two-verse video rate. I think we accelerated greatly up to about 5 or 6 in the last video. We're back to 2, because there are only 2 verses left in this chapter. So we'll read 15, 26 and 27, reading from the ESV. But when the Helper comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness about me. And you also will bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning. So, just remember the context of all this. These are the final days before the cross. In the final hours before the cross. And before that, the disciples thought everything was coming to an end. Jesus telling them everything is just at the beginning. And that the mission continues after the cross. And this mission, it involves the disciples. And it involves you and me. But not just the disciples, not just you and me. It involves the Holy Spirit. Jesus had been with the original 12. He'd walked with them. They'd walked with him. He'd been alongside them. And in NIV, where ESV has helper, it has advocate. The original Greek has the word paraclete, which kind of means one who stands alongside. So it's never intended that we will do things on our own. We do them together with the Holy Spirit. And if you look at the book of Acts, it's sometimes referred by people as, rather than just Acts of the Apostles, Acts of the Holy Spirit. And in truth, it is both. It is the Acts of the Holy Spirit, or Acts of the Apostles, working together with the Holy Spirit. But God involves us in what he is doing. And Jesus said that he has to go back to the Father in order to send the Holy Spirit. And first him here as a paraclete, one who stands alongside us, and the Spirit of truth. Now, before this, preceding verses, instead of being bad news, it says, the world hates me, it's going to hate you. Don't be surprised. And you might think, well, if it's an important part of the truth, and it's a true part of the truth which we must not ignore. If you do ignore it, you think, well, if only we present things in a nice enough way, everyone will see what a wonderful fellow Jesus is and will believe in him. That is utter nonsense. Yet it is the way that the church often proceeds, especially in evangelical churches. It has been a kind of an underlying flavour to what we have done. That's not biblical. It is the work of the Holy Spirit and us. And part of that is that the world may hate us because it hated Jesus. But also, if it was just all we had, the world will hate us, then that was bad news. But that's only half the truth. It's a half which we must have, but it is only half of the truth. The other half is that the Holy Spirit is working. And there will be those who reject, who even persecute, violently, possibly. But there will be those who believe. He's the Spirit of truth, and he bears witness to Jesus. That's the primary work of the Holy Spirit, that is to bear witness to Christ. Many other things he does, but they're all kind of geared towards that. That's his primary purpose. And then Jesus says, and you also will bear witness. Now look at this. The Holy Spirit is going to bear witness. The Holy Spirit is God. And you might think, well, if God's going to do it, why do we need to do anything? Well, that's not the way things work. It's not the way that God has chosen. God has created us in his image. And is recreating us when we're born again by the Holy Spirit, to become more and more like Christ. And God fulfills his plans by working through men and women. It says, you also will bear witness. Or I prefer the NIV here, says, you also must bear witness. And why? Because you have been with me from the beginning. Now, obviously, in general, all this applies directly to us. We have the Holy Spirit, meant to work together with him, listen to him, follow his guidance, etc. And we are to bear witness to Jesus. But we have not been with him from the beginning. The original 12 were. So apart from that bit, it all applies to us. But why that bit specifically? What is it saying then? You have been with me from the beginning. Well, God, again, it's God relying on man's testimony, in a sense. I know that it says that Jesus said earlier in John's Gospel, I do not need man's testimony. Well, in a sense, he doesn't need it, but he's supplying it as well, that they provide the historical evidence, if you like. Sometimes people say that faith is believing in things without evidence. Well, that's not a definition that the Bible knows anything about. It's not God's definition. God's definition of faith is acting on the evidence that God provides. And part of that is the evidence of the life of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus. And the original apostles were being witnesses to all of Jesus' life from about the age, was it 27 to 30, whenever he started, something of that, roughly of that sort of age. They'd been with him from the beginning of his ministry. So we'll leave it there and then go on to chapter 16. We spent quite a lot of time in chapter 15. Hope you found it helpful.